You are listening to a TechSide Network podcast, TechSide.net, casual conversation from technically passionate people.
This is Americanitis, episode 19 for May 9th, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Sagner. This podcast contains harsh language and covers adult topics. You'll be challenged by views with which you do not agree. We may not be politically correct, but we are correct about politics. Today, we have a special guest, Mr. Skyler Dye. I first became aware of Mr. Dye via a Discord server run by a mysterious Canadian named Joe. Recently, Skyler has been making content in the form of songs, literary criticisms, and mini-rants. I have to say they've all been very entertaining. I'll have his YouTube channel linked in the description and in the show notes. I asked Skyler to come on the show and pull back the thespian mask so we can get to know him a little better. Mr. Dye, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
You're not just saying that, are you?
No, no. This is the one thing all day I've been looking forward to.
Well, I'm glad to be of service. Without knowing anything about you, I watched the video where you critiqued Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and it was very clear to me that you were an actor. I used to hang around with the theater kids, and I know you don't like that term, but the theater kids at my high school, and I never did find my way onto the stage. But what interested you in theater?
I would say a joke, but I'll restrain myself for now.
Jokes are allowed on this show. It's not always serious. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, some would say they were called to the theater, but I would say my mom called me to the theater.
Is your mother an actress?
No.
Oh.
But she noticed throughout my life I've always liked performing. I would watch music videos or movie and I would act out the scenes. I would try and mimic facial expressions. My parents loved watching I Love Lucy, and I would mimic Lucille Ball all the time. And I would study like people's movements. And for example, one of my favorite movies, The Wizard of Oz, I would know every line by heart, and my favorite character is the Wicked Witch, and I would figure out her posture underneath all those robes, and I would do the voice and things like that. And eventually, around like 12 years old, my mom saw auditions for Beauty and the Beast, and I'd never been in a play before, even though I'd done like school functions and things like that. She was like, "You should go for that," and I did. And pretty much once a year, I'm usually in a show. Ever since then.
And fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll spoil it a little bit for my few viewers. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? You did not have a very high regard for that particular play.
No.
So what would you say is your favorite play you've seen so far, and why is it A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Well, the awesome thing about A Midsummer Night's Dream is that, number one, it's Shakespeare. Number two, what?
The Bard. Give it up.
Right.
Right?
The Bard himself.
What are you gonna do?
Number two, it's probably, other than maybe The Tempest, and maybe there are a couple others I haven't read. It's his most like magical, whimsical. The entire play is basically a treatise on imagination and how wonderful that is. Maybe the play is a dream, but it's got magic spells and people turning into donkeys and fairies and crazy stuff. It's wild, it's fun, and it has a special place in my heart.
Did I actually guess correctly that it's your favorite? No. Okay, all right.
No,
that would have been amazing. So what actually is your favorite play? Oh, it's a
At the
thinker.
risk at the risk of being a bit cliche, uh, I would I would have to say probably Cyrano de Bergerac. Uh, but with the caveat that I haven't read the Brian Hooker translation, which I've heard is like the best one. I just read the Project Gutenberg uh, public domain one. Uh, I only say that because technically it's fantastic, and even though it was hard to understand at times, the translation I read, I I really got into it. But that's kind of a thing for, well, if I do read this great translation, it probably will be my favorite if I already like it enough. Um, I don't really have like a single one play, that is the greatest one yet. It might be Cyrano. It might be another one if I think about it a whole lot. But I don't really have a one favorite. It kind of depends whether on the genre or the style or what draws me to it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many plays you've been in, but so far, who is the character that you most enjoyed portraying, and who would you like to embody in the future?
So I think in terms of pure enjoyment, of just fun, the character I liked the most was I got to play Igor from Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks in high
Oh,
school.
no way.
Somehow, somehow our director got away with doing one of the dirtiest musical theater pieces of all time. Um, and I got to play the funniest character. It was an absolute blast to do everything that Igor does, but in the musical theater, crank it up to 11 style. Crazy voices, weirdo faces, winks to the audience, the whole shebang. Fantastic.
What a great
Um,
movie, too. Blucha.
oh yeah.
My
um,
favorite line, I must quote it all the time. Help me with the bags. Sure, I'll take the blonde, you take the brunette. Just beautiful. It's
funny
right
enough.
up there with Airplane for me, as far as
Oh,
movies go.
oh yeah. Funny enough, that line is not in the play version. Unfortunately, they took it out. Uh, but I would say, as far as my favorite character in terms of the kind that I would see myself wanting to play on Broadway, 8 shows a week, or going on tour and doing over and over and over again, uh, I think that would be Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors, because that role has everything. It's funny, it's endearing, the music is amazing, and it's also got a little meat to it that I can chew on, and every night I can play the emotions differently or portray the character in such a way that tinkers with who he is as a person, in a way that Igor is kind of static in a sense. He's a wacky character. All Mel Brooks characters are wacky characters, but you there's a sense in which that's pure fun factor. But Little Shop also has a really great meaning to it, and it's got emotion. And if you don't play Seymour honestly, I will come and strangle you, uh, and show you how it's done. But
Fair
that,
enough.
yeah, that's probably the favorite role I've been in. Partly because it was the first really serious role I was in. Uh, it wasn't my first leading role, but it was the first time I had to do a bunch of different things at the same time on stage. Because it's like a tragic comedy, but it's not exactly tragic in that it's not depressing. Uh, and it's you have to play all these emotions really swiftly and deftly with his characterization and do a New York accent. And I'm not from New York, which is just totally wacky. Um, but I really resonated with Seymour's journey and understanding through his flaws, what not to do and where he could have steered right in that story. And that's why it's the kind of role that I would just want to play all the time. And people also love the show, so people would see it.
Yeah, I haven't seen the stage production, but it's one of my wife's favorite movies.
The
The
movie is
one,
amazing.
yeah, that's yeah, tough titty kid. Just the whole thing from cradle to grave is a lot of fun. Let's see, what else do I have here? Speaking before the show, you mentioned concerns around arts funding. Can you expand on that? What issues do you see?
So my main thing is ever since I kind of got into community theater, even as a kid, I noticed there was always talk of, where do you get your funding from? How do you budget the money for, this production? If I would go to the director of the theater I was in and say, "Oh, we should do this show," he would say, "Well, we could do that maybe in 3 years if we make enough money, et cetera," which is, fair enough, reasonable. But that led me to wonder, well, what are these issues with funding that theaters have, that this seemingly struggling community theater scene in the world, what's that about? And over again, I see so many people, whether it's talking about Broadway theaters or national theater companies or touring productions or community theaters, all the way down to, you know, your local, let's stage a reading in a library. The discussion will always go down to, hey, let's have the government fund this thing because it's important. To whom? Everybody, clearly. And people don't care enough about X, Y, or Z, and therefore we should have just money pouring in because it's important. And it's always kind of frustrated me that that's just like an arbitrarily asserted answer. Even whenever I didn't understand anything about government force and politics and why things like subsidies are wrong, morally speaking, I always felt weird when they would be brought up or when someone I knew would talk about it. I would always be like, but I mean, you get money from audiences or donations and things like that. I mean, I understand, uh, pinching your pennies, but surely just asking for money from this big source that just seems to have it, there was a disconnect there, and it's a mindset that's everywhere in the arts in general, but in theater it kind of frustrates me more because of the finite nature of what putting on a show is. A script is like a book, but then the play only lasts so long, and then it becomes a script again, and that production specifically goes away. And to I don't know, there's something about asking to just take other people's money specifically for something that is not guaranteed and not continuous that really rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. Furthermore, that's an interesting argument, isn't it? The performing arts are so important that people won't pay for it.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
And it's also compounded with this weird uh it's like there's something in people's premises that I don't know what the confusion is, because you'll have them say those sorts of things on one hand, but then on the other they will complain about, say, Broadway ticket prices, of how expensive they are. And you'll have all these appeals to, well, what about the poor people who can't afford these expensive productions? But then you'll also have them say the same thing, the opposite thing, about community theaters. Oh, more people should go see it because it's cheap and it's readily available. Why don't people see it? And it's as if they focus on this, on at once this floating kind of idea of where money comes from and what the government's function is, and also this super concrete level thing of people's bodies coming to enter theaters, and I don't know what to do with it yet, but it's something that frustrates me to no end.
Well, it does seem as though using government force to take some people's money and pump it into the arts would necessarily encourage the kinds of productions not that are the best quality, but rather have the most pull and can get those dollars, which may actually lead us right into the next question I had for you. We're also talking about the degradation of the arts. So we can talk art in general. What do you see, and this is a bit of a different question, but what do you see as the purpose of art, and how do you see it being degraded?
I have always been intensely interested in art. I mentioned earlier with memorizing lines and entire characters from movies I liked. But I think my first realization that art was a thing was my dad introduced me to Star Wars, and we had this VHS collection of the special editions, which I can see on my shelf right next to my Darth Vader statue, and copy of Gone with the Wind. Uh, and my dad was like, I want to show you this movie that I saw when it was in theaters, and I didn't know what that was. And he pops into the VHS player, and we watched it together, and he said there's this guy named George Lucas, and he made this. And I said, someone made that? He's like, yeah, it's a movie. It's a thing where actors and people and special effects, yada yada, the whole rigmarole. And I said, people, that's not. Oh, I get it. That's not a thing that's really happening. I'm seeing that's a thing that people went and they somehow did it. And I said, I want to do that. And ever since then, I've always started coming up with stories, and I would spend hours in my backyard with a stick in my hand, going from tree to tree or bush to bush, and thinking up stories to myself and acting them out completely alone when my friends weren't there or anything. And when my friends were there, I would be like, guys, let's continue that. It's basically a Dungeons and Dragons story of this thing we did, and let's go on the trampoline and pretend we're on like this planet, and let's do this, and I'll be like the dungeon master, and I'll be like the villain and this other character, and it was this awesome thing. And I've always had this like almost need to make stuff up in my head, to have these cool stories and scenarios that I want to share with people. So that's a direction I've always taken my life in. And if I don't have it, if I don't try and experience something new artistically, or if I don't consume any, I just get completely down in the dumps. Like I can't imagine being what some people are, where they'll watch, reality TV shows or documentaries and things, and that's it. They won't consume any art, even if it's fluffy or not serious. Just the idea of not even looking at it or reading something or being in something just is completely alien to me. And for me, then the purpose of art is to give me life, I guess, is what I've always imagined, as if it's a self-evident thing for me. So if someone when I was younger would insult an artwork I liked, if they said Star Wars is dumb and stupid, I would go, no, it's not. And my reasoning would be because it's not to me. And I've always held that kind of view, not as childish, of course, maybe in my more heated moments.
Well, Cyrano de Bergerac is stupid.
Funny enough, I read this article. It was like a literary critic looking at the artwork. He was like, it was a book on like theater history and the great plays, and one of them was Cyrano de Bergerac, and he wrote about it as if it was like a spectacle play with no substance, because it has in every act an entirely different set, and there's some crazy set pieces that go on in the show, and I'm like, really? You are you are you stupid? Surely you're stupid. Um,
So I guess that kind of brings us around. So we've talked about what art is. What do you see as the degradation of the arts? What did you mean by that? How do you see the arts in general, or performing arts specifically, being degraded?
so one problem that is really bad in modern theater is the fact that books, the scripts of the plays, are bad now. I mean, they've been for a while, but they're generally of not good quality, or they aren't. They don't. If it's in a musical, they don't support the libretto, the lyrics, uh, or they're just vehicles to get to the next song. They're not an integrated thing, um, and it's. I think it has to do with a bunch of different factors. I've been thinking about what I meant by, degraded, and I think it's less a conscious thing among people. I don't think most people are malicious toward how they look at artworks or how they make them. And I don't think it's necessarily an issue of, oh, they're stupid or they're actually bad writers. But I think there's something in there's a deprivation of appreciation, not for forget the great artworks and whatever you're inspired by or not, whatever. I think that there's not enough emphasis on what it can do for your life, and how it can, inspire you, or make you grab a hold of something to tie you down to reality and say, hey, this is real, and you better take it seriously. Because if you love this thing, if you had an emotional reaction to this artwork, that's real, and damn it, you should do something about it. And I don't think that kind of experience is cultivated. I don't think it's encouraged, and I don't think it's known to people, or it's felt like it should be. Not from any fault of most people's own, but it's as if like they'll feel something to a great work of art, or something that really resonates with them, but then they'll go on and they won't think of it in the way that how it applies to why they thought what they did, or why they felt what they did, or what drew them to that one scene that made them cry. They'll say, oh, that made me cry, and then that's it. And I think that's due in large part to something in the culture, in the way people are taught art, people are taught in schools, of what to value in their own experiences, in their own emotions, and their own psychology, and what art can do to help with that. I
So
think
you're
that's
thinking kind of like we get the art that we deserve, and
yeah,
that
yeah.
we're not deserving of this art at present. Because I can tell you, one of my favorite films. I said Airplane earlier, and that is, I will watch Airplane whenever. Right, I'm ready to throw down to clown.
Yeah.
You bring that to my house, we're watching it. But as far as serious movies go, 12 Angry Men. Oh my God, such a good film. Oh
I
my.
haven't watched the movie. I
You and I, we get to. I have it on my Plex server. We're gonna watch this friggin' film. It is a tour de force. It's just such an incredible film. The first time I watched it, I was just shitting around at work. Had it on the background, as one does, and and suddenly I'm just sucked in. I mean, this is an old film. This is back from when they did the whole thing like Star Trek, the original series, where, I talk now, you talk now, I talk now, and that's not how people talk, right? People are talking over each other and whatever, and so we've gotten better at that as far as writing goes, but it suffers from a little bit of that. But this is the bridge almost, and you can see it's still in black and white, I think, right? I can't even remember. I gotta watch it again, but it may be in black and white, but it's colorful, man. I watch it, and it's a movie so filled with philosophy and ethics and principles, and it's bleeding out of the screen. Beautiful film. And the first thing I said is, I need to have my wife watch this, and I sat her down, and she watched it as well, and she enjoyed it, but she couldn't tell me why she enjoyed it, and I think this is very much like what you're talking about. And so we talked about it some more, and I was able to, pull it out of her why she enjoyed it, what were her favorite parts, and things like that, why she felt the way she did. But that is one of those films that definitely makes you feel something, and what it makes you feel in the end is pride. It makes you feel pride and almost a righteous. At first, it's a righteous indignation, and then at the end, it's this swelling of pride and a surety that the world is a knowable place, and that values are achievable, right? Like right at the end, you were just hit with this. Finally, people came to the right decision, and it's about a jury, right? That's adjourned, or not adjourned. That they're sent to determine the fate of a young man who's on trial for murder. And, it turns out one of the guys is a racist, and thinks the guy did it because he's, I don't know, I forget what race he is, but that is one of the most powerful scenes, because they don't, come down on him like, oh, you're fucking racist, and that's wrong because you fucking 1619 project. No, they all just like fucking stop talking to the guy and like turn their backs on him. And it is one of the most flat out, you watch this man crumble as he realizes that he has no support in the room, that nobody thinks the way he does, that he is wrong, and he has to deal with it. And you just kind of watch him physically fall apart. Everybody in it acts really well. Like, the acting is top notch, but the writing is superb. There are twists, and I freaking love the movie. And you're right, because I can sit here and I can think about it, and I'm reliving it right now. All of these feelings that are brought out from this movie. I can tell you why I feel each feeling. But you are correct. A lot of people don't think that way, and they are happy watching, reruns of Scrubs for the 50th time. Like, don't get me wrong, Scrubs is a great television show, but there's so much art out there, and I was just listening to Yaron Brook. I don't know if you listened to his podcast, but he had one recently on heroes and art.
I listened to that last night before I went to bed.
My favorite part, honestly, of that podcast was the very beginning, where he is gushing over the fact that his book was shown for like 5 seconds on Greek television. And I was like, that's so beautiful, man. It makes me so benevolent, universe, that he's just he's like bubbling up. He's like a little kid. He's so excited, and so he should be. And he's prideful, and he's like, look, everybody, look, this thing happened. Mommy, look, I'm on TV. It's just, it made me happy.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, I was grinning. I was making breakfast, and I couldn't stop looking at my phone because I wanted to see his reaction. And I was just like, man, he is just like, he's expanding himself in this room, and just like, oh, I have this, he has this screenshot that, is like in 240p. It's slightly blurry because I'm sure the camera just panned, but it's right there. And it seems like he only recognized it so quickly because the cover was the same. And that's amazing that it just happened to be that they didn't change the cover. And if it had changed significantly, he probably wouldn't have known unless someone pointed out to him. But I don't know, the fact that he got to see it and he got to get affirmation in that, oh my gosh, this actually happened. And then he goes on to say, "Oh, we need to get my other book in this in that language." It was just like I was like, "Yes!" Oh, it was amazing.
It was just I was so happy for him. Like, look, he's like a little kid. It reminded me kind of a little bit from like Monsters Inc. when Mike Wazowski is like, "Look, I'm on the box," and it's got the circle right over his whole body. You can't even see him, right? But
Yeah.
it was adorable. Anywho, moving on. So I've watched a number of your videos, and a good amount of them, I'd say over half, showcase your vocal talents. Did you have any formal training, or is this a hobby? Is this something you want to do?
I don't have any I'm not trained technically. The closest I've ever gotten is being in a play, and one of the people there happened to be trained or a vocal coach or know how to manage their voice in some way that I didn't, and they would instruct me while I was there, and that's basically it. And I've taken it on my own from there. I basically, it's an expanded version of what I used to do as a kid. I'll listen to my favorite singers, and I'll listen to them, and I'll be like, "What are they doing there?" And I'll try and mimic it and see, oh, well, that hurt, or that didn't sound right. And then I'll look up how they sing it live, if it's a recorded version, and see what they do differently. And just I will sing my favorite songs, and usually every year I break some new barrier, whether it's an extra note added to my range, or an extra song I can finally sing, or a tone to my voice I can add. And it's all literally just because I've loved doing it. I told myself I want to sing like Freddie Mercury. I want to sing what was it I would listen to as a kid? Oh my gosh, I'm losing it. I've lost it at last. I'm going slightly mad.
We're all mad here.
Yeah, and it's mainly a fun hobby for me, but it's also a gateway for me to be in musicals and to write the songs I want to and perform them. It's a totally selfish thing because I like the sound of my own voice now, and I want to hear it, and I want to stretch it to its limits. And when I record the songs, especially for the YouTube stuff, I'm not going for perfection. I'm not going for the perfect spliced together version, because I'm not there that yet vocally, and I would rather have something out there that shows where I'm at now, so that in a year or two I can look back and say, oh, here's what I did differently, or here's what I did wrong there, and use it as a kind of guide for my own progression. And if in the future I can use it to land some gigs or get some roles in musicals, maybe paying at some point, all the better. I do hope to get training at some point to really fix the problems that I can't by myself, but I would prefer a person face to face rather than like over Skype or something. And finding a good vocal coach for that is pretty difficult where I'm at. So, I make do with what I have, and nothing's gonna stop me.
Yeah. All right. So you've been posting a bit more to YouTube, like I was saying. Again, link in the doobly doo. Your first YouTube project, you chose a reading of the Bible. So, at the risk of making a terrible pun, what possessed you there?
The Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Or was it?
But
him from downstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here all week, everybody.
Yeah, for the devil can quote scripture for his own purposes.
This is the quality content you'll get on my channel. Bad jokes and fun times.
The best.
So really, the main reason is because I've never read the Bible cover to cover, and I grew up in a Christian household, although calling it that very loosely because my family switched churches on occasion, and eventually we just stopped going to church because my family basically didn't like most of the people that go to church. And I got under the impression that uh, if if you are to be religious or spiritual in some way, then maybe the best way to do it is just to do it your own way, and to live it in the privacy of your own mind, essentially. To think things out for yourself, as my parents have always taught me. And I mainly wanted to use this as a way to close the religious chapter in my life for good. I don't think I ever really believed in a god, in a sense, because by seventh grade I was functionally an atheist, but I didn't know the term until sophomore year of high school when I stumbled upon a Christopher Hitchens video where he used the word, and I was like, "Oh, there's a word for that." Oh, okay. Uh, and I, as you'll see, because what you might see now in the series of reading the Bible, the objectivist Bible quest, as it's called, uh, what you'll see starting out now might seem very loosey goosey and
I
all over.
believe I believe the term is glib.
Glib.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I believe that's how I would describe it. It's
chicken
rather
and
glib.
glib.
I mean, you did spend about 3 minutes discussing what in the world is a firmament. And I don't fault you for that. As a matter of fact, it is a question that requires an answer. It's not quite a softament. It's not a hardiment. It's kind of right in between. It's like a firmament. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to do it in a kind of humorous way, of course, um, and it, it's. I'll just say this: the series is slightly more planned out than I let on. There are going to be things that will surprise everybody. It's hey, I'm marketing here.
Yeah.
I'm letting in on the juicy secrets without revealing them. Um, and it's going to be my personal journey through closing the chapter on, okay, you know what, I've done my research. I i i can validate my senses, and i I know without a doubt that there is no mystical man up in the sky. Reality exists and is what it is. So, what is the thing that has had been the source of all of the sorrows I had felt in my adolescence? Well, it's that damn book, Bucko. You
Bucko.
gotta
You gotta clean your room,
you gotta
Bucko.
defeat, you gotta defeat the evil book with the dagger of truth, to save yourself.
God, no matter. It doesn't matter who I interview on here, Peterson always gets dragged in. Well, so far it's just been you and Frog Machine, but
True.
Peterson, god damn it.
He's
Anyway,
everywhere.
Astute listeners, I actually wrote this bit out here. So astute listeners may have noticed a severe lean toward one philosophy in this podcast, that of Ayn Rand's objectivism. So far, you are the second person, as I said, interviewed on the show, so it will not surprise anyone that you, in fact, are an objectivist as well. I find that everybody has a story about how they found the philosophy, as it is not covered in our government schooling or in university. So how did you come across our Lord and Savior, Miss Rand?
The goddess of the market, as
Yeah.
as she is
Yeah,
called.
and her right hand, Leonard Peikoff.
Right.
Who would be the Holy Spirit? Would that be John Galt. I don't know. We have fun, but how did you come about learning objectivism?
It's actually a pretty complicated story.
I love it.
Um,
Have at it.
so
I have
so
all night.
my oh so my sophomore year of high school, I was in the production of Little Shop of Horrors. See, everything comes full circle
I
with
got
me.
it. Yeah.
Um, and I of course played the title role, and the guy that played Mr. Mushnik, the the Jewish flower shop owner, uh, he had to have a gigantic book to serve as his ledger or his calendar or whatever he needed it to be for certain scenes. He had to pull out, slam on his desk, and open up. It just so happened that during this production, he had picked up Atlas Shrugged
Yeah.
and had started reading it. And it was like one of the original, if maybe the reprint of a hardback. It was massive. It didn't have the dust jacket. It was humongous, and I think it was green. Uh, and he carried it around everywhere. And he's like, this book is ridiculous in its size. He meant.
It's also
And
ridiculous. But go ahead.
oh yeah, it's and he I don't know if he ever finished it, but he had read it throughout the production, and I flipped through a few pages and was like, wow, that's a ginormous novel. I'll put it on my list. And I proceeded for a year to not think about it ever again until the next year in I took an economics class. I don't remember what kind of economics, whether it was micro or macro. I think it was micro, but the teacher there uh, was a raving libertarian-ish type. She was the kind that she'll teach you the fundamentals of economics, but she was known for her rants about government subsidies and uh, buzzing kids on their knowledge of the book they just read, or if they read it at all. And one thing she liked to do was show clips of John Stossel's show. She's the reason I know who he is. And I remember her saying in a class once, she said, people think economics is just this political thing. Well, it can also serve in books too. Yeah, you've got your dumb, your dumb books, uh, you know, uh, going out against capitalism. You got your Charles Dickens, but you do have a book that uses economics in fiction. And what did she pull up? John Stossel's episode on Atlas Shrugged. And I was like, there's that book again, like a bolt from the blue. Uh, and I was like, well, damn. Now I gotta go get this book. And I got the book from the library, and I started reading it. And I got to the scene where Dagny was dancing and listening to Richard Halley's music in her apartment. And up to that point, I was just enthralled with it. I think this was over the course of like 2 weeks or something. And I got to that point in the book, and it was the description of the music and her reaction to it. And I literally I set the book down and I told myself, this is too big for me. Whatever this is, I I shouldn't keep going. Not because I can't, and not because I shouldn't, but I felt at the time that there was something here that deserved my patience and my respect because of that. And I put the book down and I said, maybe when I'm in college, but there's something too important there that I I shouldn't maybe I'm not ready for, but I should just let it be for now and keep it in the back of my mind. And I, since then, I'd always had the intro stuck in my head, of the bum saying, "Who is John Galt?" That first sentence, every so often, it would ping in my mind. Go read that book. What was that about? Who the hell is Dagny Taggart anyway? What's with that music? Oh my God, read it, Skyler. But I didn't. And it wasn't until summer of 2017 that I came across our good friend Euron Brook on the Dave Rubin Show interview. And within like the span of a day, I listened to that. I found Rucka's video on Jordan Peterson, I think, and a couple others on the topic of objectivism or Ayn Rand or something. And I picked up Anthem like the next day, read that, and said, "Oh my!" It was within like the span of reading it. I was like, "Oh my God, I have to keep going." For one, with her books, and two, I knew she was going to change my life. And then I read The Fountainhead, and by that point, I was almost sold. But it wasn't really until Atlas Shrugged that I could permit myself to say, yeah, I'm all in, like fully and deeply and truly. And I'm glad I waited, and I'm also kind of sad I waited in a way. And I don't know what I should have done differently, if anything, but I'm here now, and I'm glad that it happened.
So number one, you were one of those cases that was radicalized by YouTube. But I think it takes a certain maturity to take a look at a piece of art and say, I need to revisit this later. Because I don't have the span. And there are a lot of people who will read through Rand's nonfiction, right? Everything from, or even Intro to Objectivist Epistemology, The Romantic Manifesto, The Virtue of Selfishness, Capitalism, The Unknown Ideal. At this point, I'm just name dropping. And finally, Objectivism, Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. So they'll read through all that and then think, I don't need to read the fiction. That is false. And I'm talking to a certain couple of people in a Discord server that you and I both frequent. All right? You must read the fiction. And this is why. You've got Skyler here telling you, and we both understand here, the purpose of art. The purpose of art is to show you a world that could be. And it truly shows you a snapshot of life and allows you to accept or reject that snapshot. Yes, this is, or no, this isn't what is important. And it has this power that simply reading the facts of the philosophy don't give you. It's the difference between reading about lava in a scientific, kind of a breakdown in a book somewhere, or going and seeing an erupting volcano. Like, that is the stark difference. You can, read some, temperatures, or you can feel the heat coming at you. That is the difference. And it's truly what sells a lot of people on objectivism, is just reading this famously, Ayn Rand said she didn't create the philosophy and then write the books. She created the philosophy to write the books. Right? She decided that she wanted to portray the ideal man, and looked around her and said, I don't have much to go on, so I might as well build one from the ground up, and invented a philosophy in order to write some freaking novels. Like, that's incredible. And truly, the art is a massive part of this philosophy. And you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't read it. You mentioned Anthem. That is such a powerful book for how short it is. That was one of the first books I read from her because it's short. And I was like, I don't have a lot of time. I listen to books while I commute. And I mean, from the first page to the last, I was completely enraptured by that book.
It is a sin to write this.
Yeah. Oof. Just shivers.
Oh my gosh! And then there's this really cool, like, I guess epistemological or like cognitive aspect to that you are reading someone's writings in which the very act of putting pen to paper was a sin, and therefore you are engaging in reading the concepts they put to the paper, which the very idea of conceptualization in that society is wrong. And it's like, oh my God, once you understand that aspect of how deep that goes, the very first word of that book is like a sledgehammer of artistic genius. I don't know what I was gonna go with.
Fair enough. It describes. There's another person in this Discord server that I keep mentioning. And if Joe gives me the go ahead, I'll again put the link in the doobly doo. But Juno, Juno claims that his favorite is Good Copy by Rand. Have you read Good Copy?
I've read about it. I haven't read it. I don't
It's
have
pretty
a
good.
copy
I
of the
just finished it yesterday on my drive to Connecticut. Oh my God. An hour and 45 minutes it takes me to get down to where I need to be in Connecticut. It is the worst. But I finished Good Copy, and it's unlike anything else she's ever written. You think it's about this one character, and it turns out I'm not even going to say anymore. Just go read Good Copy. It's great. It's part of short stories. Is that what it's called? It's
the
not
early
the.
Ayn Rand.
It's not the plays. Yes, the early Ayn Rand. I'm listening to the one narrated by Bernadette Dunn, who also does quite a few of Ayn Rand's books. But that's a really fun one. Right now, I'm the next one they did was really not good. A lot of these, they're not good, right? A lot of these books are just. She was just learning English. Right, and she was just learning the idioms and sentence structure, right? And she came over speaking Russian and is learning English by writing it. They're not good. Specifically, what was that one? The Midnight Falcon, I think it's called. The Midnight Falcon. That was very bad. It had a cool twist to it, but you could see it coming a mile away. And everybody talked like they were some, super tough gangster. And she was really trying to shove in all of these like detective novel idioms. It's just not very good. But you can, it's very fun to watch her progression through it. The first book in this collection is I Bought My Husband. And while it's awkward, right? Again, learning English, it's awkward to step through it. She uses phrases that are out of place. The actual story almost left me in tears. It's a weird one for her because it's you can see her philosophy shaping up, but she's not quite there yet. I mean, who could be? And the main character makes what most people would call a sacrifice, a massive sacrifice. Basically lives out the rest of their life without the one they love. That's what they've written themselves off to. But if you understand what sacrifice is, you know that they didn't, and that this was the only choice in order to preserve what little they could of their values. And it's so well crafted, but it's the execution's off because she didn't understand English well enough. But and that's what stops it from having such an emotional impact. But it's a really good story. So anyway, back on track. How did we get here? All right. So you're obviously the ideals of objectivism are a little atypical. They're not mainstream in any way. There are dozens of us. Dozens! So I'm interested, how did your family or friends react to these atypical ideas? Have you talked to them about it at all? And what do they think?
So I've discussed it on and off with people, particularly my mom. Um, Mainly in terms of of my emotional reactions to the artworks and saying, guys, you need to read these books. They're awesome, and um I would say things, now and again, about Ayn Rand herself or her life or who I'm listening to, bits and bobs, but we've never like sat down and had like a discussion on any of it. My mom did watch with me the documentary Ayn Rand: A Sense of Life, which is amazing, and you can get it for DVD or Blu-ray on Amazon.
Link in the doobly doo.
Maybe, probably not.
Probably not.
Doobly doos or no.
Yeah.
The the main thing I think is, um, I, I at risk of speaking on kind of on her behalf, I think my mom really was into l- listening to what I was into, and I think my parents are in general like that. Differences or no, um, I think they've always liked hearing about what I want or what I want to do or talk about. Every single basic choice I've ever made in my life, they've always gone back to, well, what do you think? What do you want? Do you want this? Do you not? When I had to make the decision of running track or doing the school musical, they said, well, what are your thoughts? And we talked about it. And their ultimate conclusion was, it's your choice to make. We'll support you no matter what, but you have to do it. And you should do it for what you want to do. And uh, that's been a real help in our relationship, I think. But as far as the full extent of how she's shaped my life in the last few years, as to the extent of politics or epistemology or metaphysics or any of that, um, it's not the kind of thing we've really discussed yet, and it's not the kind of thing that uh, I don't think will probably be brought up because it's not really super important. For me, my parents are, in general, uh, great enough people that the differences are minor, and it's a kind of uh, live and let live situation, in the sense that so long as I'm doing what I love and essentially pursuing my values, then they will support me 100% behind it.
Well,
And that's,
I've got to tell you, uh, consider yourself fortunate. That is hugely positive
yeah,
to have parents that are supportive in that way, instead of, no, damn it, you'll go into the coal mining business like your father, right? You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. My parents were a lot like that as well, and I think that engendering a sense of independent thought probably allowed our discovery of this philosophy earlier than we possibly could have. So
Yeah.
good on you for
and
that.
and and, and even then, even with possible things I'm still wrestling with myself, especially on like a subconscious level, getting rid of the bad stuff. uh it There's a sense in which that's facilitated being ahead in a way. I'm not so far back that, I wasn't raised in a super orthodox religious family, or with certain principles that were like completely opposite to the philosophy or of what I've tried to guide my life with. uh it's a mixture of things, and the good stuff are the things I've always tried to live up to, and the stuff I I didn't accept. I've just been like, well, okay, that's something I don't accept. What do I do in place of it? And I think I found the thing that is in place of the stuff that I'm not too keen on. And so long as I stay the course, I think good things are ahead.
That's a wonderful note to end on. Well, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit down here with me in our fireside chat. And if our listeners would like to find you and enjoy your content as much as I do, where can they do that?
So I do have a YouTube channel called Dyed Red, capital DYED space, capital RED. I also have a Twitter account. That's the main social media I use nowadays under my real name, and sometimes my fake name as well. But I have many fake names and only one real face, which is mine. Right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
That was probably very confusing for our audio listeners. No, that was not a glitch. All right, so on Twitter as well, I will be sure to provide both of those links because trying to spell out a Twitter handle is something that I am very familiar with, and it's annoying. So I will put both of those links in the description. And once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you later.
See ya.
Got a topic or feedback? Reach out on Twitter. The podcast is at @AmericanitisTech. That's the @ American, ITISTEK. You can also follow me at @Dan Sagner. My last name is spelled Sierra Alpha Golf November Echo Romeo. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts if podcasts are your thing. I'm also on YouTube, so remember to subscribe there. Patronize us at patreon.com/TechSide. Show notes are at techside.net/Americanitis. Theme music by Eddie. I thank you all for listening. Later days.